The next bill on the calendar for the day is House File 4502. The clerk will report the bill.
House File number 4502, number 3 on the calendar for the day, an act relating to energy, the first engrossment.
I recognize the member from Anoka, the author of the bill, Representative Stevenson, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, House File 4502 is the Energy Conservation and Optimization Act, or ECO. It modernizes and expands Minnesota's highly successful Conservation Improvement Program, or SIP. SIP is one of the nation's leading energy conservation programs. To date, this program has saved enough energy to power 100,000 homes annually. It has provided $6 billion in net benefits and supports 45,000 local jobs in every corner of the state. But SIP hasn't been significantly updated since it was passed in 2007, and the energy landscape in our state has changed significantly in that time. It's a big bill, but at a high level, this bill expands SIP to allow for energy savings that can be realized through load management and fuel switching, completes the transition from a program based on energy conservation spending to one based on actual energy savings. It increases the conservation goal for our investor-owned utilities. It doubles the support available to low-income customers of investor-owned utilities, and it provides regulatory flexibility to our co-ops and munis. The other really significant aspect of this bill is the incredible coalition that supports it. It has the support of all of Minnesota's investor-owned utilities, Xcel, Minnesota Power, and Otter Tail Power, as well as the co-ops, munis, and G&Ts. Every single electric utility in the state supports this bill. It's also supported by the state's largest natural gas utility, CenterPoint Energy. It's supported by the clean energy community. It has the support of consumer advocacy groups, such as the Citizens Utility Board. It has the support of labor unions, such as IBEW Local 292. And it has the support of business groups, such as the Minnesota Mechanical Contractors Association and the National Electrical Contractors Association, as well as some of the leading members of our corporate community. Incredibly, I haven't even listed all of the organizations that support this bill. While this coalition is huge, it's important to note that not everyone supports the bill. And I'm trying to listen to those who haven't supported yet and trying to address their concerns. I know that one group that has expressed some concerns is the propane industry. I've heard propane argue that the fuel switching provision in the bill will harm them. I've heard them say that fuel switching will also be bad for Minnesota because according to them, propane is cheaper and cleaner than Minnesota's electrical supply. Well, I have great news for them. This bill is fuel neutral. It doesn't prefer one fuel to another. Fuel switching is only allowed if the switch saves money and decreases emissions. If propane really is cheaper and cleaner, it won't be eligible for a switch to electricity under this bill. A bill this significant and lengthy requires the help of many, many people to get to the floor, and I want to specifically thank our incredible nonpartisan staff who have worked very hard under incredibly difficult circumstances to make this bill happen, including our great Energy House researcher, Bob Eliff, who went far and above the call of duty on this bill. Also, Mike Malzahn, whose guidance and support has been invaluable. Also want to thank my legislative partners on the bill. Representative Eklund has been just a phenomenal partner on this bill, but also Senator Rarick, who's carrying the bill in the Senate, and Representative Long, who carried the forerunner of this bill last year. Last, I want to address the question of why now. Some might be wondering why we are considering this bill now while we're attempting to contain the pandemic and respond to an economic crisis. Well, as I mentioned before, SIP provides billions of dollars of net benefits and supports thousands of jobs. We expect that this bill will result in more investment and more jobs. We also expect it will help millions of Minnesotans to save money on their energy bills. I know some have raised concerns that increasing the investor-owned utility goal to 1.75% will increase costs for consumers, but that is absolutely not the case. The data shows that all of Minnesota's investor-owned utilities have hit the 1.75% goal for each of the last several years. In fact, the investor-owned utilities often achieve savings north of 2%. Indeed, energy conservation is a significant reason why, even though Minnesota's electrical rates have risen in recent years, the electrical bills that our residential customers actually pay are still below the national average. In fact, a 2019 report by the Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory showed that energy efficiency programs are the cheapest way to meet electric demand. And another study shows that energy efficiency generates $4 of value for consumers for each dollar invested. In sum, this bill will save consumers money and create jobs. Thank you.
There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Baker moves to amend House File Number 4502, the first engrossment as follow. The amendment is coded A5.
The member from Candy, Ojai, Representative Baker.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I rise to reflect a little bit about what Representative Stevenson had to say about some of the concerns of the bill, and I'm offering an amendment today that does what we should do, and that is make sure that we remove any new mandates in this bill. And one of the most important one that Representative Stevenson had mentioned was raising the investor-owned utilities, again, Xcel Energy, Minnesota Power, Otter Tail Power, to require them to spend a minimum amount of money each year on goal savings so that monies can be lessened down the road. The problem that this has in today's world, members, is that even though utility companies say they're already spending the money, just what happened? What would happen if something crazy happened like a pandemic? And they wanted to make some changes to their business plan. They wanted to lower some of their costs. They are still unsure about what the outcome is going to be on ratepayers able to pay their bills in a number of months. And what this bill does is it increases the cost of that mandate at a time when anything like this should not be considered. So this is the time that we should say no to this. This bill is not ready yet to be passed off the floor. This one amendment is one I also raised in committee. But raising the cost for the IOUs is the wrong thing to do. Now, as the author of the bill said, they don't mind this at this time. They don't. Because investor-owned utilities can just pass it along to their ratepayers. Makes more money for the shareholders. It's a different model than the co-ops and the munis, so it doesn't affect them in this way. But this is not the right thing to do for over half of the citizens of Minnesota that actually pay their electricity from an IOU. This is a good deal for the munis and the co-ops, and I support that part of this. But for half of the state of Minnesota, we have to stand up for all of Minnesota when it comes to ratepayers. Half of my district is more than covered with a municipality and a candy co-op. But I also have some of my communities are under the Xcel Energy territory. I have to stand up for them on this too and say, this isn't the right time to force them to bring up that floor on their spending. This is an amendment I hope members you can support. Thank you.
There is an amendment to the amendment. The clerk will report the amendment.
Swazinski moves to amend the Baker amendment to House File Number 4502, the first engrossment as follows. The amendment to the amendment is coded A10.
The member from Lyon, Representative Swazinski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, members here and afar. The A10 really recognizes the unique times that we're in. And I also want to thank Mr. Eloff for his hard work on our amendments and the bills as we move these things forward. You know, this amendment is pretty straightforward. It really kind of puts a pause button. So when we're in times of pandemic or an emergency, these utilities are able to simply, when those things are declared, push a pause button to say, you know what, all right, let's stop. Let's focus in on what we need to do to lessen the cost, lessen the exposure. You know, there is definite fear out there that the utilities will not be able to reach their current mandates because of the COVID-19 outbreak. You know, you can just imagine the practicality of individuals and families that are maybe looking at doing a potential project or a business that the last thing they want to do is have a stranger come in their home. It's one thing if the furnace breaks, but it's another thing if it's maybe more of just a decision that they want to make as a family. And I also, just while I'm up, want to speak to the Baker underlying amendment as well to save the folks a little time. I think the important part, folks, is, while we're told by these utilities, investor-owned particularly, that, hey, we're already doing this. We're doing sometimes 2%. This legislature seems to have a bad habit this session of taking things that the private sector is already doing on their own and mandating into law. Whether it's to do with the pharmaceutical industry, now it's with this energy bill. They're taking things that they're doing on their own, they're moving above and beyond while they can, and they're setting it into law. And folks, I understand that these groups support it, and I think Representative Baker spoke quite clearly on the fact that more revenue means more potential profit for those organizations. And in a time when we're told, well, businesses just want to do what's right. Well, let's let them do what's right. Let's not force them to do it. If their customers want this and say, hey, we want this to be part of your portfolio. We want you to tax ratepayers so that you can pay for these energy efficiency programs. Let them do it. We've got a lot of programs out there that are essentially a mandate that raise taxes or raise costs, but those dollars never come in. It's, the bill's pretty straightforward. It doesn't have a large cost to the state of Minnesota. But that's because all the costs are realized outside of the realm from a regulatory standpoint. So the dollars are generated within the utility, the dollars are spent within the utility, and then it generates a report that goes to either the PUC or the Department of Commerce to make sure that they're in compliance. And, I've been here a few years, but I think we honestly need to look at, just from a fundamental purpose of what government does, and is that what we should be doing? Should we be increasing mandates? Should we be increasing the demands of business within the state, whether it's publicly owned, privately owned, or cooperative, the rest? And, there are some decent parts of this bill, and I think something that we can all agree on is that the SIP program needs reform. And, I would just ask for your support on this amendment to the amendment, because I think we need to allow some flexibility within the program, and let's not increase mandates in a time of pandemic. Thank you.
Discussion. Representative Stevenson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would respectfully ask for a no vote on this amendment. We are in unusual times, and we certainly should take that into account. But I think one thing that maybe Representative Skinski and Representative Baker should be aware of is that the bill does have flexibility for all of our utilities. Representative Baker mentioned that if something happens, we want utilities to have the flexibility to go back and say, well, we can't make these goals now for whatever reason, and that's already in the bill. So if the pandemic is causing utilities to have any difficulty in meeting these goals, they can have those conversations with Commerce and work on those issues already under the bill as it stands here. And so I don't believe that this is a necessary amendment, and I would ask for a no vote.
Representative Spedzinski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I think just something to point out that here we have in the 810 amendment, it written in the law that specifies what the relief would be, what the flexibility could potentially be. Under the bill that's before you, the flexibility lies within an unelected commissioner of the Department of Commerce to say, hey, would you please, I'm a utility and I can't reach this mandate. Would you please allow me? Maybe, maybe not. But guess what? Right here actually does it. You have election certificates, the folks that are sitting in this room, the folks sitting in their living room, and the folks that are sitting in their tractor, to make this decision, to give this relief, to give real flexibility within this bill that stands before you. And I think that's an important difference to make. It's one thing to empower the bureaucrats, the unelected folks that run our state, and many times they do a great job. But many times I think we as a legislature advocate too much pressure and too much power to those folks. And I think this is a great opportunity just to simply put our hand on the scale for those folks that are actually paying the bills and running these programs to be in their favor most every single time. Thank you.
Now we want to know which member is voting from their tractor. Any further discussion to the amendment to the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no. The motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. To the underlying amendment, Representative Baker.
Madam Speaker and members, I guess I just want to remind you once again that this is not the time to do a mandate. This is not the time to raise any associated costs with running a utility company, whether you're a muni, a co-op, or anything. I urge a yes vote on my amendment to at least keep the millions of dollars that are currently being spent by all of the utilities in Minnesota at the same level it is now, and not to increase those required spending any further. I urge a yes vote on my amendment. Thank you.
Representative Stevenson.
Madam Speaker, very briefly, I just want to say that we know that this bill will not increase costs for consumers. Increasing the goal to 1.75 won't. In your email boxes are letters from all of Minnesota's investor-owned utilities indicating that they can meet their goals within their current budgets. Excel says that they are confident they can do so because they are already meeting their budget. As I mentioned, all of the utilities in Minnesota have been meeting their goals over the last several years. And I think it's important to say what Representative Baker said about how this is raising the floor a little bit. That's what we're talking about doing here. In 2007, when the SIP program passed in 2007, 1.5% was a goal that utilities were trying to get to. Now we're talking about going up to 1.75% because utilities are pretty consistently getting above 2%. So it makes sense to reflect that new normal that we're having here.
Any further discussion to the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no. The motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Swazinski moves to amend House File number 4502, the first engrossment. The amendment is coded A7.
Representative Swazinski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, members, and all those that may be out and about this fine day. I move the A7 amendment before the House floor here. And this amendment particularly talks really to the focus of what are people paying for. And Representative Stevenson just mentioned in his last comments on the Representative Baker amendment before us that this new mandate, this increase in the state sanctioned portion of this bill will not increase the cost. And well, why is it? Because they're already doing it. They're already past that. And what does that mean? That really means that the SIP program is costing ratepayers across the state hundreds of millions of dollars. And so those are potentially already baked into the cake. And so when you're really focusing in on what this amendment does, it's really on-bill reporting. And we're going to say, oh, Chris, you're putting a mandate after you just got done saying you don't want to have mandates. But I think this is really a transparency to say, what is the cost? What does it mean to that mom and pop shop? What the major utilities will say is that, the large consumers, some of the mining industry, some of the heavy industrial manufacturers are not privy to this. They are exempted because of the increased costs and some of the international pressures they have to be able to maintain a cost structure that keeps them competitive. And so what this amendment does is simply line out on people's bills so they understand what SIP is costing them. So if you're a fairly large operator in the state, and that way you can see what this costs on your daily bill. So I know a number of years ago, I'm still on the Legislative Energy Commission, and I remember when we opened up the bill, and right there on the bill it said Legislative Energy Commission, X amount of dollars. And what that did was a number of years ago we increased that so that they could hire a full-time person, which is not being filled, so there's hundreds of thousands of dollars, so that has not blinked back on. But I think it's within our privy, and I think it was a number of years ago there was a conversation with the PUC in talking about, hey, let's be open. Let's have this conversation. Let people know what is driving the costs of their electricity, what is making the cost of electricity. It's residential or industrial or whatever that might be. Oh, it's only going to cost an individual family a couple dollars a year. Well, if you're an individual or a business, it's much, much more than that. And I think people should know. And so that's what this bill does, and I'd appreciate your support. Thank you very much. And I'd ask for a roll call.
Representative Swedzinski requests a roll call. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Stevenson.
Madam Speaker, I would ask for a no vote on the A7 amendment, which asks for a number of lines to be added to every single bill that every single utility in the state prints out. I favor transparency in these things generally, and I can vividly recall bringing a bill to do that to the Energy Committee and being told it was a terrible mandate upon our co-ops in munis in greater Minnesota. This is a compromise bill that's been carefully put together by a lot of people for a long time, and I just don't think that this is something that makes sense to add right now. I think it would needlessly complicate people's bills in a way. We already have seminars being offered to help people understand their electrical bills, and this would make people's electrical bills a lot longer. So I'd ask for a no vote.
Any further discussion to the Swedzinski amendment? Seeing none, the clerk will take the roll on the Swedzinski amendment to the Stevenson bill.
Acom.
Acom, no.
Acom, no. Albright.
Albright, yes.
Albright, aye. Anderson.
Anderson, aye.
Anderson, aye. Backer.
Backer, aye.
Backer, aye. Bonner.
Bonner, nay.
Bonner, no. Barr. Barr, aye. Baker. Baker, aye. Becker Finn.
Becker Finn, no.
Becker Finn, no. Bennett.
Bennett, aye.
Bennett, aye. Bernardi.
Bernardi, nay.
Bernardi, no. Bierman.
Bierman, no.
Bierman, no. Bow. Bow, aye. Brand.
Brand, no.
Brand, no. Cantrell.
Cantrell, no.
Cantrell, no. Carlson, A.
Carlson, A, no.
Carlson, A, no. Carlson, L.
Carlson L, no.
Carlson, L, no. Christensen.
Christensen, no.
Christensen, no. Claflin.
Claflin, no.
Claflin, no. Considine.
Considine, no.
Considine, no. Daniels.
Daniels, aye.
Daniels, aye. Doubt. Doubt, aye. Davids. Davids, aye. Davney.
Davney, no.
Davney, no. Dean.
Dean, no.
Dean, no. Damath.
Damath, aye.
Damath, aye. Detmer. Detmer, aye. Drazkowski.
Gruskowski, aye.
Drazkowski, aye. Eklund.
Eklund, no.
Eklund, no. Edelson.
Edelson, no.
Edelson, no. Elkins.
Elkins, no.
Elkins, no. Erickson.
Aye, Erickson.
Erickson, aye. Fabian.
Fabian, aye.
Fabian, aye. Fisher.
Fisher, no.
Fisher, no. Franzen.
Branson, no. Or no. Branson, yes.
Franzen, aye. Freiberg.
Freiberg votes no.
Freiberg, no. Garofalo.
Garofalo, yes.
Garofalo, aye. Gomez.
Gomez, no.
Gomez, no. Green. Green, aye. Grossel.
Russell, aye.
Grossel, aye. Grunhagen. Grunhagen, aye. Gunther.
Gunther, aye.
Gunther, aye. Haley.
Haley, aye.
Haley, aye. Halverson.
Halverson, aye.
Halverson, aye. Hamilton.
Hamilton, aye.
Hamilton, aye. Hanson.
Hanson, no.
Hanson, no. Hassan.
Hassan, no.
Hassan, no. Hausman.
Hausman, no.
Hausman, no. Heinrich.
Heinrich, aye.
Heinrich, aye. Heinzman.
Heinzman, aye.
Heinzman, aye. Her.
Her, no.
Her, no. Hertos.
Happy birthday. Hopefully you get out of here. Hertos, aye.
Hertos, aye. Hornstein.
Hornstein, no.
Hornstein, no. Howard.
No.
Howard, no. Hewitt.
Hewitt, no.
Hewitt, no. Johnson. Johnson, aye. Jordan.
Jordan, no.
Jordan, no. Jurgens.
Jurgens votes aye.
Jurgens, aye. Keel.
Keel votes aye.
Keel, aye. Cleavorn.
No.
Cleavorn, no. Cagle.
Cagle, no.
Cagle, no. Katiza Watun.
Katiza Watun, no.
Katiza Watun, no. Kosnick. Kosnick. Kreshaw.
Grisha, aye.
Kreshaw, aye. Kunish Podine.
Kunish Podine, no.
Kunish Podine, no. Lehman.
Lehman, aye.
Lehman, aye. Lee. Lee.
Lee, no.
Lee, no. Lesh.
Lesh, no.
Lesh, no. Liebling.
Liebling, no.
Liebling, no. Lean.
Lean, no.
Lean, no. Lily. Lily, no. Lippert.
Lippert, no.
Lippert, no. Lislegard.
Listlegard, no.
Lislegard, no. Long.
Long, no.
Long, no. Lucero. Lucero, aye. Lewick. Lewick, aye. Mahoney.
Mahoney, no.
Mahoney, no. Mann. Mann.
Man, aye. I'm sorry, no.
Mann, no.
Man, no.
Mann, no. Mariani. Mariani. Markwart.
Markwart, no.
Markwart, no. Mason.
Mason, no.
Mason, no. McDonald.
McDonald? Yes.
McDonald, aye. Mecklin.
Meckland, aye.
Mecklin, aye. Miller. Miller, aye. Moeller.
Moeller, no.
Moeller, no. Moran.
Moran, no.
Moran, no. Morrison.
Morrison, no.
Morrison, no. Munson.
Munson, yes.
Munson, aye. Murphy.
Murphy, no.
Murphy, no. Nash.
Nash, aye.
Nash, aye. Nelson M.
Nelson M, no.
Nelson M, no. Nelson N.
Nelson N, aye.
Nelson N, aye. New.
New, aye.
New, aye. Nor.
No, no.
Nor, no. Nornis.
Nornis, aye.
Nornis, aye. Novotny.
Novotny, aye.
Novotny, aye. O'Driscoll.
O'Driscoll, yes.
O'Driscoll, aye. Olson.
Olson, no.
Olson, no. O'Neill.
O'Neill, aye.
O'Neill, aye. Pulowski.
Pulowski, no.
Pulowski, no. Purcell.
Purcell, no.
Purcell, no. Petersburg.
Petersburg, aye.
Petersburg, aye. Pearson.
Pearson, aye.
Pearson, aye. Pinto.
Pinto, no.
Pinto, no. Poppy.
Poppy, no.
Poppy, no. Poston.
Poston, aye.
Poston, aye. Pryor.
Pryor, no.
Pryor, no. Quam.
Guam, aye.
Quam, aye. Richardson.
Richardson, no.
Richardson, no. Robbins. Robbins, aye. Runbeck.
Runback, aye.
Runbeck, aye. Sandell.
Sandell, no.
Sandell, no. Sandsted.
Sandsted, no.
Sandsted, no. Sauk.
Sauk, no.
Sauk, no. Schumacher.
Schumacher, yes.
Schumacher, aye. Schultz.
Schultz, no.
Schultz, no. Scott.
Scott, yes.
Scott, aye. Stevenson. Stevenson, no. Sundin.
Sundin, no.
Sundin, no. Swazinski. Swazinski, aye. Tabke.
Tabke, no.
Tabke, no. Tice.
Tice, aye.
Tice, aye. Torkelson.
Torkelson, aye.
Torkelson, aye. Erdahl.
Erdahl, aye.
Erdahl, aye. Vang.
Vang, no.
Vang, no. Vogel.
Vogel, aye.
Vogel, aye. Wagenius.
Wagenius, no.
Wagenius, no. Wozlowick.
Wazluik, no.
Wozlowick, no. West?
West, aye.
West, aye. Winkler? Winkler, no. Walgamot?
Wolgamott, no.
Walgamot, no. Zhang Jie?
Zhang Jie, no.
Zhang Jie, no. Zhang Ti?
Zhang Ti, no.
Zhang Ti, no. Joachim?
Joachim, no.
Joachim, no. Speaker Hartman? No. Speaker Hartman, no. Kosnick? Kosnick?
Cosmic votes aye. Cosmic votes aye.
Kosnick, aye. Halverson? Halverson?
Halverson changes from aye to no.
Halverson changes from aye to no. Mariani?
Mariani, no.
Mariani, no. That's it, right?
There being 59 ayes and 75 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There are no further amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House File Number 4502.
Third reading. Discussion. The member from Sibley, Representative Gruenhagen.
Is this on? Yep. Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. Members, I'm not on the Energy Committee, so I have relied a little bit on analysis by staff. But according to staff, this bill will lead to the near term to rate hikes for large utility customers. The bill will lead to longer-term rate hikes for all electric consumers. The bill will lead to job losses for propane and fuel oil dealers. As you know, there is some good in this bill that I can support, and I would like to if it wasn't filled with some of the things I strongly oppose. Because when I look at this bill, I see that it continues the war on coal and oil. And remember, members, technology has always solved our pollution problems. You know, oil, coal, and natural gas provide efficient, reliable, and cheap energy. Alternative energy, on the other hand, such as windmills and solar, are inefficient, unreliable, and expensive. And to me, that's the direction this bill takes us. The other thing, members, I know a worker who worked with alternative energy, windmills specifically, met him several years ago. And he said that the workers who assemble the windmill hub have to wear protective gear because there's harsh chemicals inside of that hub. He also indicated that solar also has harsh chemicals. So what we're doing, members, is we're promoting through this alternative energy, not clean energy, but dirty energy. It's inefficient, unreliable, and expensive. And I believe we're creating, with this alternative energy mandates, one of the biggest environmental disasters in the history of the state of Minnesota. And there's no money that I know of that's set aside to deal with this when these things become obsolete. Members, I had a lobbyist for energy stop into my office before COVID, and he showed me the rate increases just under current law with this alternative energy. I mean, we're going to skyrocket our electricity costs in this state, and it's not going to produce clean energy. You know, we can say it's going to reduce electricity rates, but if we look at the laws that have been passed regarding energy by the Minnesota House in the last decade or so, it's resulted in increased rates. So members, if you care about your children, your grandchildren, low-income people, and seniors, I urge you to vote against this bill, okay? And remember, the global warming is a UN tax stealing scam. We can have clean energy, oil-based or propane or whatever, and it can be penny cheap to our consumers with modern technology. But we can't have that when we're promoting this alternative energy nonsense. Members, previous laws and this law are simply the Obamacare of energy in this state. We're driving up the cost, hurting our businesses and our citizens. So I strongly urge you, members, to vote against this bill. Thank you.
The member from Candio High, Representative Baker.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I wanted to stand up and thank the author for his work on this bill, and I also was one of the co-authors with Representative Eklund when the SIP bill was around last year. I was one of the 18 or 19, I think, GOP members that were also on that bill. This bill is much different than that, and I wanted to just give an overview of what the SIP was and is. And again, it's complicated. It's been around 20, 25 years. Conservation Improvement Program is what the SIP stands for. Again, it gives rebates to a lot of folks buying new refrigerators, new washers and dryers, and it's been around a long time. And I think that most utility companies and munis and co-ops would tell you that the low-hanging and even the medium-hanging fruit is pretty much gone. That you can't buy a new refrigerator these days without having it star rated. And I think that is a clear message to the way our private industries work to improve their products with technology. They've done a really good job in improving that over the decades. So SIP needed a redo. And I knew that a number of years ago when I was working with Senator Marty on this, when we just started to get this thing rolling. And again, I appreciate the work because there are some things in this bill I really do like. I like the fact that our munis and co-ops have come to an agreement so they see more clearly for their members, their smaller organizations, how they can get their arms around this portion of the bill. For that reason, this part of the bill is good. I have talked to a number of members around the state of Minnesota who are covered by munis and co-ops. That part of the bill isn't bad. We're getting a lot of support from those friends of ours and members out in the rural area for that. But we're state legislators. We're not county legislators. We're not service area director legislators. We represent the entire state of Minnesota. And the reason I'm having a hard time supporting the bill today is because it's not quite ready. It really shouldn't go to the Department of Commerce to figure out the rest of the rules and then be presented to the PUC for let them figure out the remaining part of this. My concern is that we're 70, 80% right, but we have some major issues in here that should really be talked about. And I hope that when it leaves the House floor, it comes back better with some of the provisions we talked about today. Let's get rid of the increasing the mandates for the public utility companies that represent millions of citizens in Minnesota. Propane industry is vital to rural Minnesota, and they were not at the table. They were not part of the conversation They should have been, whether they participate in SIP or not, they should have been there anyway to be talking about what do you like about this, what don't you like about this, because fuel switching and industries or energies going over one or the other is not what has been the history in Minnesota. They have all worked very collaboratively, and in this case, they really were kind of left out. Now, one thing I learned about propane is it is one of the cleanest fuels out there. It takes 2.8 units of energy to get 1 unit of energy, electricity, to the load, so the end of it. Let me say that again. It takes 2.8 units of energy to deliver 1 unit of energy to the load, which is the end user. Propane, on the other hand, is 1.01 energy to the load. So it's almost no energy created, almost except delivering it to the premise. So it's a super clean energy. It's one that I think most people in Minnesota know that. And propane is an amazing industry for us in Minnesota, and we have to do what we have to do to protect this industry. If they don't like it, members, 134 members around the state of Minnesota, we need to pay attention to what the propane industry says. One of the ideas I think that should come back with this bill once it leaves the House floor, assuming it'll pass. I know Senator Rarick has worked hard on this bill as well in the Senate, and I hope that it comes back with some cleaner language, and I ask the author to consider this when he takes it to conference committee, is to bring back some cleaner language that recognizes that propane clean energy side of things. And I know that he respects the propane industry, so I hope that we bring back an amendment or a new bill that shows that fuel switching, if you're gonna switch the fuel, by all means, then it should be a cleaner fuel. That should be part of that conversation. Not just cheaper, but it also should be cleaner. So members, I want to thank the utilities around the state of Minnesota, the munis, my friends at the co-ops. They have worked hard on this bill, and we're almost there. But this one today I cannot support, and I hope that we send a strong message of concerns to this bill to make it better when it comes back to the House floor, because the Conservation Improvement Program is an important program that I will support going forward. And I do hope I can support the bill when it comes back. So members, today I'm going to be voting no. I would appreciate your doing the same. We can do this one a little bit better. Thank you, members.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Robbins.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, members. Like Representative Gruenhagen, I am not on the committee and I am not deep in the weeds on these issues, but I have been contacted by dozens of constituents over the last few days and have had quite an education. So I am rising in opposition to this bill because the parts that are good, that I really do support, are the parts that Representative Baker referred to, the flexibility that it provides the co-ops and the muni operated utilities. And that's been long sought and long needed. They need the flexibility. They have more mandates than others, and so I appreciate that very much. But the part I can't support is the mandate increase to 1.75. I struggle to see how this makes any sense. Referring to Leader Doubt's comments earlier, 640,000 Minnesotans are out of work. Many of those people are rightly being granted the ability to continue to have their power left on, even if they can't pay their utility bills. I think that's something we all support. But what that means is that people who are paying their utility bills are going to be the ones making up the difference. And so that's already going to be a rate increase on payers, whether you're in the consumer-owned, the co-op-owned or the customer-owned or the IOU one. Sorry, I'm having a moment. Can't remember the name of that, but the investor-owned, forgive me. So either way, the consumer, the customer, no matter which system you're in, is going to have a rate increase or increase in their cost of energy this year. We cannot then tack on top of that another mandated increase that maybe, I know Representative Stevenson says that, well, it doesn't matter because they're already above the 1.75, they're at 2 or above anyway. But if they are, then this is not necessary. And if, when the economy is in trouble, people cannot continue to invest in new lighting systems or HVAC systems for their business, and maybe they struggle to meet the new 1.75 mandate, then that will also increase costs. So I really think we have to be standing up for the consumer who will face rate increases and increases in their energy bill this year. And so I'm supporting what's going on for the co-ops, and I appreciate the hard work that's gone into that, but I really am hoping this comes back from the Senate without the rate increase. So, and I also support the amendments that Senator Rarick is proposing to involve propane in this. He has 2 amendments that my understanding was were supposed to be offered here in the House but missed the deadline. And so if we come back with no rate increase and we come back with the Rarick amendments that will involve propane in these discussions of how the fuel switching will be administered, then I think we'll have a pretty good bill. Thank you, members.
The member from Monoman, Representative Green.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you to my colleagues. They have hit on most of the topics I was going to hit on, but one thing that they have left out so far, and that is the ratepayers and what it really means to them. And we're talking electricity here, and we're only dabbling in the propane part of this. And I can tell you that in my area, over the last years, substantial investments have been made in upgrading old fuel oil furnaces to propane. And it's a big hit. In fact, some of the people there are still paying those off. And now you're going to require this fuel switching. And I'm not sure if you really realize what that's going to do to these folks. In Monoman County, Wild Rice Electric sends out right now 500 notices every month for people who are not be able to make their electric bills. And that was before the COVID. So we're a poor county, and with a lot of the folks in other counties as well. They can't afford these mandates. It just can't happen, not for them to stay viable. Because every time you pass one of these, you may think you're doing something better into the future, but all these ratepayers are getting increased in their costs. And I'll remind you, the last time something of this went through this chamber, before I was here, on a bipartisan vote, was in 2008. And the people in my district and across Minnesota saw their electric rates nearly triple. And it took a long time to get over that, and even now, we're still seeing the residual effects of that for people that can't make these bills. A lot of people, when electricity was low, before the last mandates came on, did put in electric plenums within or electric furnaces in their plenums. And most of them can't afford to run them now because the electric rates are so high. We got a small reprieve here in the fact that a lot of people switched over to do propane. We have the farmers that rely heavily on propane for their drying. And if we start doing this, we're going to not only hurt the electric costs, because the mandates are going to drive up those costs. By reducing the amount of propane that we're moving forward through the state, we're going to substantially increase the cost of propane. This is going to hurt everybody. This is not a well thought out bill. And as Representative Baker said, the SIP program is antiquated. It's just over. We're continuing to buy, help purchase new appliances that are energy efficient, but you can't buy a non-energy efficient appliance. So you may be helping one person for a short time, but their rates are going to go up to do this as well. The other mandates on our electric companies also include they have to spend a certain amount of their money. For Wild Rice, it's nearly $250,000 every year to tell people not to use electricity. Ratepayers are also paying for that. It's time that we really did some responsible work here and start looking out for the people of Minnesota. So I hope you vote no on this bill.
The member from Anoka, Representative Stevenson.
Madam Speaker, pardon me. Thank you for the debate today, members of the chamber. I just want to conclude with a few points. First of all, I want to note that this really is a compromise bill that has resulted from years of discussions from just a ton of people from a ton of different perspectives. No one in this chamber is going to like 100% of what's in this bill. That's the nature of when you get a large group of people together and work collaboratively and try and find a solution that can work for everyone. So I can hear, my colleagues talking about some of the things they don't like. That's fair. But on balance, this bill should be moving the ball forward for everyone. I think everyone should be able to recognize that. I want to address a few things that were brought up. First of all, a lot of talk about this fuel switching provision and its impact, particularly on propane. The number one thing I want to tell you is fuel switching under this bill is not required. And it's fuel neutral, right? So we're not preferring one type over another. Fuel switching can only happen under this bill if it's cost effective and reduces emissions. So, Representative Baker was making some great points about how propane functions. And, if that's true, then the fuel switch won't be allowed under those circumstances. And the people who are concerned about propane shouldn't be under the plain terms of the bill. I also want to talk a little bit about who had seats at the table here. As I mentioned, this negotiation has been going on for a long time, years. I think Representative Baker talked about his involvement going back years on this subject. And, propane has had a chance to make their views heard. They participated in conversations with the Department of Commerce. Senator Rarick has been working with them quite a bit, as was already mentioned. I, at the committee hearing, told them that I'd be happy to talk to them anytime. And, the other thing I would note is that a bill that was about 95% the same as this bill passed off the House floor last year. So it's not coming out of nowhere. Propane has had a lot of time to get in. I also want to say, I want to disagree respectfully with the comments of Representative Baker that we've gotten rid of all of the low-hanging fruit here and that there's nothing really left to do here. Actually, our energy conservation has been accelerating. We were at 1.7% on the IU basis in 2014. We're at 2.3% in 2017. Co-ops were at 1% in 2014. They're 1.4% in 2017. There's a lot more that can be done in this area. And as I said in my opening remarks, it's the cheapest way for us to meet our electrical demand, costing about a fourth of what any other type of electricity costs. So there is room to keep growing here, and we should be continuing to work on it. The bottom line is this bill will save consumers money and will create jobs. And that's why I ask for your yes vote.
The member from Lyon, Representative Swedzinski.
Thank you, Madam Speakers. I think we'll all agree on the House floor as we stand here today that SIP needs reform. Some of the work that's been done, particularly for the co-ops and munis, I think is a slight positive, but I don't think it's positive enough to cast a green vote for this bill at this time. I think fundamentally we need to look at what is the changes we've made here in the legislature that we move forward. Representative Stevenson talked about that this bill has been under negotiation for over 2 years. Some of the work that's been done in the meantime was some of the democracy work that says, local cooperatives are democracy. They're locally elected folks that make decision on where their electricity should come. And I fundamentally disagree that we should continue mandating at all to utilities that are directly responsive to their member-owned utility. We should allow those folks to decide whether or not they want to implement a program that has a 1.5 SIP or 1.7 or 2. I think that's the fundamental difference that we need to be taking into these conversations to say, do we trust locally elected officials to make decision on schools? Do we allow folks that are locally elected to make the difference and choices on their utilities and what programs they offer and how they tax one another in order to achieve those goals? So I think that's a fundamental difference that we may have as we look forward when it comes to dealing with locally elected folks that represent us in the electricity world, and I think that's the way we need to change here at the state legislature. While some of the mandates and changes allow some flexibility when you go and ask the Department of Commerce if you're having trouble, but at the end of the day, this does increase the cost overall by hundreds of millions of dollars. Not this particular bill, but the program as a whole. And we might be raising it here, lowering it there for certain folks, That may be true, but I think we had an opportunity to really bring those things into the light with my amendment that sadly went down, to line item it and show folks that because there is a fair amount of popularity, you ask, well, oh, you know, I think that's a good idea. I like that. You know, that's a free program that we get to utilize to lower the cost of energy for folks. But folks, it's not free. It does cost hundreds of millions of dollars. Early on when we heard this Representative Stevens' bill in committee, one of the things that was brought to light because of the timing, it had been worked on for a long time, but I think most folks fell because of the COVID pandemic that this bill was particularly DOA, that the propane folks were really set on, their heel and really felt that they kind of got backdoored a little bit on this thing, and they felt they weren't brought to the table because they weren't. They weren't brought to the table, said, what are your thoughts? And I understand Representative Rarick has opened the door to those folks and is entertaining some language, but I would ask members to say that those folks need to be at the table and those folks need to give a green light, because believe it or not, those folks are mom and pop shops where they deliver heating oil to homes or propane. They're an affected business model. I think something Representative Stevenson said that says reduce emissions. Well, what does that mean? I know all winter long, my propane furnace exhausts right outside out the side of my house. And if that's going to be the reasoning to say, well, if it reduces emissions, CO2, that's fine, but if it doesn't, well, then it's open. I think that's how that's going to be, and I think that's the real fear that propane folks have is that, well, look at that, right there, it's got CO2 and it's coming out of the side of your house. The practicality nature of what propane does is it takes a gas or a liquid and turns it into a gas and then turns it to another gas. And if that's going to be viewed as emissions and viewed like that, then I think propane folks do have something to be concerned about. And this is a domino effect. If you take out homes, if you take out market share, all of a sudden, as a farmer and a leader, what does that mean? How many businesses will survive? How many folks will be able to contain within the industry and the infrastructure that's needed to maintain it? And what will that do to ultimate costs? As of right now, this bill picks winners and losers. It does some good things, expands things. And I think something we should also be fearing is the updated goal. So currently the goal is 1.5. Moves it, I believe, to 2.5%. And, this legislature, I think, understands what goals are. Sooner or later, they become mandates. And I think that's the price to be paid. I think utilities are so desperate to get out from the underneath of this thumb of this really fairly rigid mandate on them that they're willing to give up things like, well, we'll put a goal in, even though we know that, next session, I know there's probably going to be a member that says, well, don't you believe that we should have a goal and shouldn't we do things to achieve it? Do you agree? Do you agree? Yeah, that conversation may not happen next session. May not happen the next, but it will happen, folks. And that's a piper to pay, and it's a trade-off. Folks are going to get a little bit of relief in the SIP from one side of this. And they say, well, we're already doing it anyway. Why not? But when it becomes 2.5 or 3 or whatever that goal may be, and when it becomes a mandate, those things are real. Because when you push that green button, folks, you're saying, well, this is already happening, so we'll vote yes. But there are other parts of the bill that aren't. That will be required someday, and it will be used against some legislator that sits in your seat, maybe 5, maybe 2, maybe 1, maybe 3, maybe next week, against them to say, well, this is a goal, another legislator supported it, and you should support it too, and let's mandate that. So, this bill is opposed by the Minnesota Chamber, petroleum retailers, folks, the folks that sell gas and heating oil, and the propane. And while this bill does have some good things for some cooperatives, but what is the trade-off? I think we should be empowering those folks that have locally elected boards that can vote and place these things in themselves, but that's not before us today. So I ask for a no vote. Thank you.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Long.
Not always easy. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Energy policy is not always easy to navigate. There are lots of different interests and different points of view. But if you are a legislator who wants to support clean energy, I think this is as safe a bill as you're going to find. We passed a version of this bill out of the House last year, but since then the biggest changes we made were the result of discussions with cooperative and municipal utilities. And for cooperative utilities and municipal utilities in particular, this bill will provide increased flexibility to meet their energy efficiency targets. For example, it increases regulatory flexibility to submit their efficiency plans every 3 years rather than every year. It removes current minimum spending requirements and moves to a program instead based on energy savings. But you don't have to take my word for it. The letter that was sent around from the Minnesota Municipal Utilities Association said, ECO relieves mandates and offers flexibility that will help utilities be efficient and keep costs down. We've heard some concern in the discussion today about the customer impacts of this bill. But the good news is that energy efficiency is by far the lowest cost energy resource and a lot cheaper than building new generation. So why should we have energy efficiency goals at all? Shouldn't we just let utilities decide on their own? Well, the reason we have efficiency goals is for our consumers. Generally, utilities don't want to sell less energy, but consumers certainly do want to use less energy and save money on their bills. According to the Minnesota Department of Commerce, every dollar invested in the Conservation Improvement Program generates at least $4 in benefits from energy savings, and to date, the SIP program has provided $6 billion in net benefits to Minnesota. All of the investor-owned utilities are already meeting the requirements of this bill. They all support it, and they can all meet the goals within their current budgets. The SIP program doesn't regulate propane. The concern seems to be over fuel switching. This provision was flexibility that was requested by folks like cooperative utilities and municipal utilities. But any fuel switching project under this legislation will be required to pass important cost effectiveness tests and also will have to demonstrate clear energy savings benefits to customers. We always like to think of ourselves as the best in Minnesota, but for energy efficiency, we're only the 8th best. So we've got to get competitive. This bill will help us make even further progress on the already noteworthy energy efficiency work we have as a state. And lastly, there were some questions about why now. I just want to talk a little bit about the job benefits of the conservation programs. We're talking about electrical, heating and cooling, ventilation, insulation installment. These are over 445,000 local jobs right now that are supported in the state by the Conservation Improvement Program. And these efficiency projects are shovel ready. In the last economic downturn, the federal government's stimulus answer was the Recovery Act. 1 in 8 of those federal dollars were for energy efficiency or renewable energy programs. So we know that investing in these projects now will not only help consumers save money on their energy bills, but it will also stimulate the economy at a critical time. It's likely impossible to satisfy everyone when it comes to energy legislation, but I'd be surprised if we see as widely supported a bill as this one for many more years. I want to thank Representative Stevenson for his hard work on this bill. I was honored to carry this provision last year in Governor Walz's clean energy package, and it's been great to team up with Representative Stevenson this year. I also want to thank the coalition that has worked so hard to get this agreement, and I urge members to support.
The clerk will take the roll. Members on the phone, please be prepared when he gets to your part of the alphabet. Thank you.
Acom.
Acom, aye.
Acom, aye. Albright.
Albright, no.
Albright, no. Anderson.
Anderson, no.
Anderson, no. Backer.
Backer, no.
Backer, no. Bonner.
Bonner, aye.
Bonner, aye. Barr. Barr, no. Baker. Baker, no. Becker Finn.
Becker Finn, aye.
Becker Finn, aye. Bennett.
Bennett, aye.
Bennett, aye. Bernardi.
Bernardi, aye.
Bernardi, aye. Bierman.
Spearman, aye.
Bierman, aye. Bow. Bow, no. Brand.
Brand, yes.
Brand, aye. Cantrell.
Cantrell, aye.
Cantrell, aye. Carlson, A.
Carlson, A, aye.
Carlson, A, aye. Carlson, L.
Carlson, L, aye.
Carlson, L, aye. Christensen.
Christensen, aye.
Christensen, aye. Claflin.
Claflin, aye.
Claflin, aye. Considine.
Considine, aye.
Considine, aye. Daniels.
Daniels, no.
Daniels, no. Doubt. Doubt, no. Davids. Davids, no. Davney.
Davney, aye.
Davney, aye. Dean. Dean. Damath.
Damath, no.
Damath, no. Detmer. Detmer, no. Driscollowski.
Driscollowski, no.
Driscollowski, no. Eklund.
Eklund, aye.
Eklund, aye. Edelson.
Edelson, yes.
Edelson, aye. Elkins.
Elkins, aye.
Elkins, aye. Erickson.
Erickson, no.
Erickson, no. Fabian.
Fabian, no.
Fabian, no. Fisher.
Fisher, aye.
Fisher, aye. Franzen. Franzen. Freiberg.
Freiberg votes yes.
Freiberg, aye. Garofalo.
Garoppolo, yes.
Garofalo, aye. Gomez.
Gomez, aye.
Gomez, aye. Green. Green, no. Grossel.
Grossel, no.
Grossel, no. Grunhagen. Grunhagen, no. Gunther.
Gunther, no.
Gunther, no. Haley.
Haley, no.
Haley, no. Halverson.
Halverson, aye.
Halverson, aye. Hamilton.
Hamilton, no.
Hamilton, no. Hanson.
Hanson, aye.
Hanson, aye. Hassan.
Hassan, aye.
Hassan, aye. Hausman.
Hausman, aye.
Hausman, aye. Heinrich.
Heinrich, no.
Heinrich, no. Heinzman.
Heinzman, no.
Heinzman, no. Her.
Her, aye.
Her, aye. Hertas.
Urtas, no.
Hertas, no. Hornstein.
Hornstein, aye.
Hornstein, aye. Howard.
Howard, aye.
Howard, aye. Hewitt.
Be ready in a minute.
Hewitt, aye.
Hewitt, aye. Johnson. Johnson, no. Jordan.
Jordan, aye.
Jordan, aye. Jurgens.
Jurgens, no.
Jurgens, no. Keel.
Aye.
Keel, aye. Cleavorn.
Cleaborn, aye.
Cleavorn, aye. Cagle.
They're a couple steps ahead of us.
Cagle, aye.
Cagle, aye. Katiza Watun.
Katiza Watun, aye.
Katiza Watun, aye. Kosnick. Kosnick. Krisha.
Grisha, no.
Krisha, no. Kunish-Podine.
Kunish Podine, aye.
Kunish-Podine, aye. Lehman.
Lehman, no.
Lehman, no. Lee.
Lee, aye.
Lee, aye. Lesh.
Lesh, aye.
Lesh, aye. Liebling.
Liebling, aye.
Liebling, aye. Lean.
Lean, aye.
Lean, aye. Lilly. Lilly, aye. Lippert.
Lippert, aye.
Lippert, aye. Lislegard.
Lislegard, aye.
Lislegard, aye. Long.
Long, aye.
Long, aye. Lucero. Lucero, no. Lewick.
Lewick, no.
Lewick, no. Mahoney.
Mahoney, aye.
Mahoney, aye. Mann.
Man, aye.
Mann, aye. Mariani.
Mariani, aye.
Mariani, aye. Markwart.
Markwart, no.
Markwart, no. Mason. Mason.
Mason, aye.
Mason, aye. McDonald.
McDonald, no.
McDonald, no. Mecklen.
Meckland, nay.
Mecklen, no. Miller. Miller, no. Moeller.
Moeller, aye.
Moeller, aye. Moran.
Moran, aye.
Moran, aye. Morrison.
Morrison, aye.
Morrison, aye. Munson.
Munson, no.
Munson, no. Murphy.
Murphy, aye.
Murphy, aye. Nash.
Nash, no.
Nash, no. Nelson, M.
Nelson, M. Aye.
Nelson, M. Aye. Nelson, N.
Nelson N. No.
Nelson N. No. New. New.
New, no.
New. No. Nor.
Nor, aye.
Nor. I. Nornis.
Nornis, no.
Nornis. No. Novotny.
Novotny, no.
Novotny. No. O'Driscoll.
O'Driscoll, no.
O'Driscoll. No. Olson.
Olson, I.
Olson. I. O'Neill.
O'Neill, I.
O'Neill. I. Pulowski.
Pulowski, aye.
Pulowski. I. Purcell.
Purcell, aye.
Purcell. I. Petersburg.
Petersburg, no.
Petersburg. No. Pearson.
Pearson, no.
Pearson. No. Pinto.
Pinto, aye.
Pinto. I. Poppy.
Poppy, I.
Poppy. I. Poston.
Poston, no.
Poston. No. Pryor.
Pryor, I.
Pryor. I. Quam.
Bomb, no.
Quam. No. Richardson.
Richardson, I.
Richardson. I. Robbins. Robbins. No. Runbeck.
Runback, no.
Runbeck. No. Sandell.
Sandell, aye.
Sandell. I. Sandsted.
Sandsted, I.
Sandsted. I. Sauk.
Oak, aye.
Sauk. I. Schumacher.
Schumacher, no.
Schumacher. No. Schultz.
Schultz, I.
Schultz. I. Scott.
Scott, no.
Scott. No. Stevenson. Stevenson. I. Sundin.
Sundin, aye.
Sundin. I. Swazinski. Swazinski. No. Tabke.
Tabke, aye.
Tabke. I. Tice.
Tice, no.
Tice. No. Torkelson.
Torkelson, no.
Torkelson. No. Erdahl.
Erdahl, no.
Erdahl. No. Vang.
Vang, I.
Vang. I. Vogel.
Vogel, no.
Vogel. No. Wagenius.
Wagenius, I.
Wagenius. I. Wozlowick.
Wozlowick, I.
Wozlowick. I. West.
West, aye.
West. I. Winkler. Winkler. I. Wolgamott.
Wolgamott, aye.
Wolgamott. I. Zhang Jie.
Zhongji, aye.
Zhang Jie. I. Zhang Ti.
Zhongji, aye.
Zhang Ti. I. Joachim.
Joachim, I.
Joachim. I. Speaker Hartman. Speaker Hartman. I. Dean.
Dean, aye.
Dean. I. Franzen.
Branson, no.
Franzen. No. Kosnick.
Cosmic, no.
Kosnick. No. Got them all right.
There being 79 ayes and 55 nays, the bill is passed and its title agreed to.